LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the July 21st edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out the weekend's 13 best, most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the Big Five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which would be a really educational, informative, fair use, media criticism, and political commentary show for you all tonight. Actually, there is no NBC News Meet the Press, even though they say if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. That's something that's dishonest that Chuck Todd says at the end of every episode, because it's Sunday and there's no Meet the Press because of the U.S. Open. So I'll have a short clip from MSNBC's AM Joy. That's going to be my political comedy clip. It's more of like a wry observation. There's no Bill Maher till August. There's no Saturday Night Live probably till September? Who knows for sure. So that's the political comedy on it's a pretty dark topic. The lowest of the lows, possibly, for the Trump administration. There have been so many lows, it's hard to really say what the lowest of the low is. In my opening clip, you'll see a comparison to Charlottesville, basically the racist attacks on, you may remember from last week's show, that they broke right before the Sunday morning news analysis shows, and they were covered on all of the shows, where Trump told the squad of 4 women of color who are members of the U.S. Congress that they should go back to where they came from, even though 3 of them were born in the United States and one is a refugee from Somalia and is a U.S. citizen and a member of the U.S. Congress. So that was followed up by chants at a Trump rally of "send her back, send her back, send her back," which Trump then the next day disavowed and lied about, but then sort of switched back, and it was all kind of reminiscent of Charlottesville, which leads me, that's the first topic, is the whole Trump attack on the squad. Then I'll have a few clips on Trump crime impeachment update, because Mueller is supposed to testify this week, and there was some interesting information that came out in the Michael Cohen campaign finance felony case against Donald Trump that I'll cover briefly. And then I'll have one clip at the end, the Democratic candidate update clip of Cory Booker, that you may be hearing something about Cory Booker, you may be hearing from Joe Biden in the upcoming debate that's the week after next. This is Mueller week coming up, then debate week the week after that. But like I said, I want to start with this sort of political comedy clip, a wry observation. Dionne talks about how Trump has to signal to white supremacy, or says something outrageous and then walks it back, but then signals to white nationalists that he actually does agree with them. And you'll see AM Joy calls this way that Trump takes all these different positions so that he can seem to not be racist, but still let the racist people know he's racist over here.
Just state the obvious. If you tell 4 women of color, 3 of whom were born here,
right,
that you should go back to where you came from, a kind of street bully epithet, that is racist.
Right, yes.
And there's no denying it. And they want to have it both ways. They want to say, we weren't being racist, but by the way, we have the same definition of what it means to be American as you do, white nationalist or backlash person. And they can't, I think they had a bad week because Trump had to change his tune more than usual. He went forward, then back, then forward again, and they know they've got a problem.
Well,
here.
I call that a full Charlottesville at this point.
Yes.
That's what he did, right? I mean, the emperor's new clothes. He's now completely new.
I think it's even worse, maybe.
Yeah, it is, because here's the thing: is that
worse than Charlotte? Well, the wry observation is that what Trump did this week is the full Charlottesville, where he starts off saying something outrageous, and then walks it back begrudgingly, and then sort of walks back the walk back to tell the people, the people who he doesn't want to offend, that are intolerant of non-white people, that he is sort of on their side. And the thing is, I follow a lot of people on the right on Twitter, and After Charlottesville now, they have like this whole like rewritten narrative about Charlottesville that, oh, well, because first they create this straw man argument that Trump said Nazis and white supremacists were good. No, he said there were fine people marching with the Nazis and white supremacists. But they point to like certain places where he walked it back, but then they don't put it in the context of how he begrudgingly walked it back. And then the next day came back around and like doubled down on the original offensive comment. That's sort of the full Charlottesville there. So there was no NBC News Meet the Press, which usually has the longest, best news summaries. But I do have, news summaries from all the other four, not really from Face the Nation, because it's just a brief summary going into Vice President Mike Pence's interview with Major Garrett that I'll sort of criticize when we get to that. But that's the fourth one. The first one is actually the best one this week. It's from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where I think he does the best job of showing the dishonesty of Trump's disavowal and covering basically the events of the week and talking about how it's been 1 week since the original "go back to where they came from" tweet, which I'll talk about a little more with you after we watch that clip together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. It's been exactly a week since President Trump sent that first tweet calling on 4 Democratic members of Congress, all women of color, all citizens, to go back to the countries they came from. Every day since dominated by the debate and division the president unleashed. Raw, racist politics. It's a tactic Trump has deployed so many times before, the reaction predictable too. Outraged Democrats passed a House resolution condemning the remarks. Elected Republicans, embarrassed in private, publicly backed the president. Trump's base, exemplified by that Thursday night crowd in North Carolina, excited.
Omar has a history of launching vicious anti-Semitic screeds.
Under fire the next day, the president said he wasn't happy with that chant, but you can see for yourself how he reacted in the moment. And by week's end, he was continuing to claim that congresswomen hate America while calling his chanting crowd incredible patriots. Trump's racial battle lines are drawn. The question now, how will all of us, Republicans, Democrats, the press, and the public respond? And we begin this morning with the chair of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman Elijah Cummings. Congressman, thank you.
And I will have a couple clips edited together of that Elijah Cummings interview coming up. Oh, I forgot to say, down in the video description, you can see my clip list and follow along on my notes on my clips. For example, you would come down and see, oh, clip 8 is that edited Elijah Cummings clip in my clip list. Right now, I'm going to clip 3. Which is the CNN State of the Union news summary, which is pretty good. It doesn't show the full 13 seconds of Trump listening to the crowd chant, "Send her back, send her back," but it's a shorter news summary, and it does go through the facts and the disavowal, and it uses the word racism, which I think is important, and it talks about how it all started with Trump's tweets 1 week ago today, which I'll talk about a little more with you after you watch Dana Bash start off CNN State of the Union with "Here we go again," because that's sort of like the full Charlottesville. It's another racist low for the Trump administration over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in for Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is "Here we go again." President Trump is beginning yet another Sunday with an attack on 4 freshman Democratic congresswomen, tweeting just moments ago, "I don't believe the 4 congresswomen are capable of loving our country. They should apologize to America and Israel for the horrible, hateful things they have said. They are destroying the Democratic Party, but are weak and insecure people who can never destroy our great nation." Now, it was exactly a week ago this morning that the president told the same 4 congresswomen to, quote, "go back and fix the countries they came from" in a series of racist tweets. By midweek, the president was disavowing a chant by his own supporters at a rally provoked by those tweets to, quote, "send her back." about Somali-born Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, an American citizen, and falsely saying he had spoken up to quickly stop those chants. Now, on Friday, the president reversed himself, calling the rally-goers incredible patriots. And now today, he is questioning those congresswomen love of the country. So joining me now is someone who is running to replace President.
And I will also have a couple Cory Booker clips, including that last clip where I'm going to talk about how he is not being honest about his personal history with police reform in Newark, where I don't think he was a really good champion of police reform, and he even cites the ACLU, which I think is completely disingenuous. That's the last clip I'll be showing you, and then there's another Cory Booker clip coming up. But you notice that both of those clips talked about racism. This Fox News summary, even shorter, from Chris Wallace, goes out of its way not to say the word racism. Talks about the hateful tweets. Now, to be completely fair to Chris Wallace, in the teaser that comes right before he says hello again at the beginning of this clip, they do mention issues of race, but don't say racism. And there is, I think, in part of the interview with Stephen Miller, I'm going to show you a couple Stephen Miller clips, more than anyone could possibly stand, probably. I'm going to be watching those clips for the third time, so if you're having problems watching them for the first time, just remember I'm watching these clips for the third time. But when his Stephen Miller interview, at one point in a part where I don't think I took a clip, I think Chris Wallace says that he tries so hard not to call the president racist or his tweets racist, but sometimes you just have to, or sometimes racial but it's definitely true that he's stoking racial animosity or something like that. That might be in one of the clips, but here's the Fox News Sunday news summary from this morning that doesn't use the word race at all about Trump's racism over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. Send her back. That is the phrase and the debate that has consumed Washington and much of the country this week. Critics of the president's comments say urging 4 congresswomen to go back where they came from is hateful. But Mr. Trump says he won't stand for some of the things the so-called squad says about this country. Joining us now, top White House advisor Stephen Miller. Stephen, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Great to be here. Thank you.
And like I said, I am going to have a couple Stephen Miller clips coming up. If you're following along on the clip list, the Stephen Miller clips are clips 6 and 7, so there's only one more clip before the 2 Stephen Miller clips. And like I said, they did not mention race in that clip, or racism, which seemed like a huge omission in the news coverage there. But there's also kind of an omission at the end of this coverage from Major Garrett. This is, like I said, this is a brief introduction from Margaret Brennan on CBS's Face the Nation about what's been going on with Trump's racist tweets. And then there's an excerpt from an interview with Vice President Pence from CBS News reporter Major Garrett, who you may remember used to be a Fox News reporter. And I don't think, well, apparently the whole interview is going to air on Tuesday, I think. But in this excerpt, I don't think it's the greatest interview, and especially when he lets Vice President Pence get away with claiming that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said that America was garbage. And I'm actually going to show the 2 clips after that, Chris Wallace doing a much better job of cross-examining Stephen Miller on the whole garbage accusation. But I just wanted to, you can watch out for that at the end of this clip. Like I said, brief news summary at the very beginning of Face the Nation, and then here's part of the vice presidential interview from Major Garrett over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. President Trump is doubling down on his attacks against 4 Democratic members of Congress known as the Squad, tweeting this morning that he does not believe, quote, they are capable of loving our country. In an interview at Cape Canaveral yesterday, CBS News chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett asked Vice President Pence about those send her back chants from the president's supporters.
Were those chants appropriate?
If you're unhappy with them, do you want to see them repeated? Is this part and parcel of the 2020 echo of the Trump campaign? It seems a simple question.
Well, no, Major. The president wasn't pleased about it, neither was I. And the president's been very clear about that. But what we're also not pleased about is the fact that there are four members of Congress
but you know
who
that
are
this
engaging in
president's
the most
relationship with
outrageous
his
statements.
supporters is as close as anyone has ever had in American politics. This could all go away with one simple word or a phrase or something. You have a chance to say it right now.
Well,
don't do it again.
Major,
is that your message?
Major, the president was very clear.
Was he?
That he wasn't happy about it, and that if it happened again, he'd make an effort to speak out about it.
He will make an effort to speak out.
That's what he's already said.
Okay.
And I think that millions of Americans share the president's frustration about sitting members of Congress engaging in that kind of reckless rhetoric, whether it be anti-Semitic rhetoric, whether it be referring to Border Patrol agents as running concentration camps. And the president thought it was important to stand up to them, and I'm glad he did it.
Can you be patriotic and oppose the president's reelection?
Of course. But what these members of Congress have been doing, referring to our country as garbage,
that's unpatriotic.
It's unacceptable.
It's unpatriotic.
And President Trump is going to continue to stand up for America and call out.
And you see Major Garrett there did not follow up on the whole garbage comment at all, which is a total misquote of what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, as you'll see in the clip after next. But that's the second Stephen Miller clip from the end of Chris Wallace's interview. The beginning of Chris Wallace's interview with Stephen Miller, he started off showing a bunch of clips of Trump saying some kind of racist stuff. So this kind of makes up for the lack of racism, the mention of racism in the Fox News Sunday news summary I showed earlier. And there is some mention of racism. My one criticism of the clips or the history of controversial statements, you'll see that Chris Wallace talks about the long history of controversial comments, but racism does come up in the follow-up questions. But anyway, my one criticism is that there's only one instance of Trump racism from before he ran for president. It's the birther, saying that President Obama wasn't born in the United States and the whole, secret Kenyan thing. But if you look at a link I put down in the video description to this Vox article, Trump has a history of racism or racist comments and acts that go all the way back to the 1970s. And that Vox article, they keep updating it. Last time it was like his long history of racism from the 1970s until 2018. Now it's until 2019, and it was just updated this month. So I definitely, if you don't think Trump is racist or has a history of acting in a racist way, because you can't see into his heart, but all you can do is see what he does and says. If you look at what he has done and said since the 1970s all the way up until go back to where you came from this last week. There's a long history of racism, so you can check that out. And Chris Wallace shows some of that history, not much. There was one from 2011, and then I think next is 2016. Nothing going back to the 1970s. And Stephen Miller's ridiculous defense of the Trump administration. Now you're going to have to watch him. I actually almost called the title of my live stream is Trump Lowest Low ? But I went through several different titles. I was thinking of making it Trumpism's ugly face, and then just using Stephen Miller's face in the thumbnail with like ugly as the word in the thumbnail. So I just wanted to let you in on that little inside bit of information as to my process of titling the video and thinking about the thumbnail. I go through many different variations, and as you watch Stephen Miller's face, do you think he is the ugly face of Trumpism? Well, actually, Chris Wallace is about to show you a bunch of clips that are the real ugly face of Trumpism at the beginning of his questioning of Stephen Miller over here.
Chris.
You are the president's senior policy advisor and his chief speechwriter. His tweets this week about those 4 congresswomen, and let's put them up, why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came, are the latest in a long string of controversial comments by Mr. Trump, some of which I know that you helped draft. Here are a few.
I want him to show his birth certificate. There's something on that birth certificate that he doesn't like. They're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
You had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly.
Why shouldn't someone see all of that as racist?
I think the term racist, Chris, has become a label that is too often deployed by the left, Democrats in this country, simply to try to silence and punish and suppress people they disagree with, speech that they don't want to hear. The reality is that this president has been a president for all Americans, whether you look at historically low black unemployment rates, historically low Hispanic unemployment rates, or if you look at what he's doing on immigration to protect safety, security, rising wages for all American citizens.
But when he questioned, and let's say there's a long record here, when he questioned whether or not Barack Obama was an American citizen, when he said the people in his announcement that Mexico is sending to this country are not their best, they're rapists, they're drug dealers, and some are good people, when he called for a total and complete shutdown of the Muslim ban, something I know you were very involved in, that's not protecting the American people, that is playing the race card.
I couldn't disagree more. I mean, let's take, for example, the issue of the recent indictment we saw of 22 MS-13 gang members in California.
We're not talking about hardened criminals.
Well,
all right, let's talk about the Obama and the birther. You don't think that questioning whether or not the president of the United States, the first black president, is an American, you don't think that there's a race quality to that?
They raised questions about John McCain's circumstances of birth. They raised questions about...
There were never raised questions about John McCain. There was a question about whether he was born in the Panama Canal or not. There was never a race question about John McCain.
I fundamentally disagree with the view that if you criticize somebody and they happen to be a different color skin, that makes it a racial criticism. In fact, he wasn't
criticizing them. He was questioning whether he's an American.
You saw from Congresswoman Presley this week that she was saying that if you're brown, you have to speak like a brown person. If you're black, you have to speak like a black person. That's the kind of ideology the president is rejecting. If you want to have a colorblind society, it means you can criticize immigration policy, you can criticize people's views, you can ask questions about where they're born, and not have it be seen as racial.
And can you also say, go back where you came from?
First of all, and I'm glad that we can now get to what I think we really want to focus on. With the "send her back" chant, the president was clear that he disagreed with it.
No, well, he was clear after the fact. He let it go on for 13 seconds, and it was only when the chant diminished that he started talking again.
Right,
he said nothing there, and he said nothing in his tweet. I promise I'm going to give you, but he said nothing there or in his tweet after the rally that indicated any concern about the chant.
Right, but I want to get to the core issue. The president was clear that he said he disagreed with that tweet. But the core issue is that all the people in that audience and millions of patriotic Americans all across this country are tired of being beat up, condescended to, looked down upon, talked down to by members of Congress on the left in Washington, D.C., and their allies in many quarters of the media. And let's get specific about it. You saw the quotes from Representative Omar saying some people did something about 9/11. And yes, if you watch it in context, it's worse. You saw the quotes from Representative Omar talking about how, oh, well, we talk about al-Qaeda in a menacing tone. And by the way, she's giggling throughout this interview. But we don't talk about the Army in a menacing tone. And yes, if you watch it in context, which I have, it's even worse. And perhaps most shocking of all were the comments made by Representative Ocasio-Cortez saying that our border agents are running concentration camps, and therefore they are Nazis, and therefore everyone in that audience, and you and me and everyone who supports our Border Patrol are, by extension, Nazi sympathizers. We support Nazis if we support border agents. And I have one more point on that I have to say.
Okay, go ahead.
Which is that I'm a Jew, as an American Jew. I am profoundly outraged by the comments from Ocasio-Cortez. It is a historical smear. It is a sinful comment. It minimizes the death of 6 million of my Jewish brothers and sisters. It minimizes their suffering, and it paints every patriotic law enforcement officer as a war criminal. And those are the comments, Chris, that we need to be focusing on.
Well, the president says that the 4 Congress...
So I guess Stephen Miller at the end there, he noticed at the beginning, Chris Wallace said, "Isn't that playing the race card?" And he said talked about racial questions. He never really said racism. In case I missed it, he didn't say racism. And like I said, there's one part of the interview that I don't think I'm showing that he specifically said that he tries very hard not to call the president or his tweets racist. But then by the end there, Stephen Miller's playing the Jew card. And I can say that because, as I mentioned multiple times during my live stream, during my Sunday live streams, that I was raised in the Jewish faith, Reformed Judaism, although I'm an agnostic atheist at this point. But I do have Jewish ethnicity, and I do have some sensitivity to anti-Semitism, and I don't really agree with Stephen Miller's assessment there of what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, just the opposite. I think if you really believe in never again about the Holocaust, you have to be vigilant that we're not treating people, dehumanizing people in the ways that I was talking about in the last couple of weeks with the immigrants at the border. Concentration camps, I talked about that several weeks ago when that first came up, that concentration camps aren't death camps. I don't know. A lot of people do associate the word concentration camp with the Nazi death camps, but it predates them, and it just means holding a whole bunch of people in detention, not for crimes, but because of who they are. These are refugees applying for asylum. They're not even illegal immigrants, or because it's legal to apply for asylum. But anyway, I didn't want to go into all those issues, but I did just want to say one more thing about Chris Wallace's cross-examination there. I think that he let Stephen Miller get away with saying that, and I've watched it in context, and it's even worse because he's trying to make it seem like if you were to watch it in context, he's correctly spinning what the members of the squad have said in these controversial comments, and it's actually the opposite of the truth. It's all twisted. All the quotes are twisted out of context, or almost all of them anyway, and Chris Wallace did not really cross-examine Stephen Miller on any of those. And in context, I've watched it, it's even worse. In context, it's even worse. But there is one statement that Chris Wallace cross-examined Stephen Miller on, and it's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's comment about America being garbage, which wasn't really what she said. And then his follow-up question, I think is like the best follow-up question of the week. I've criticized Chris Wallace multiple times in previous clips, but he does have a really great follow-up question after talking about the context of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's garbage comment with Stephen Miller in this. This is the final Stephen Miller clip. For those of you getting sick of listening to Stephen Miller, this is only like 3 minutes, 21 seconds of Stephen Miller, then no more Stephen Miller after this clip that I will talk about with you after we watch it together over here.
Go to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The president is particularly upset with one particular slur by the Congresswomen. Here it is.
When people are speaking so badly, when they call our country garbage, think of that. That's worse than deplorable.
But here's what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and he's repeated that often, that somebody, and he didn't say it was AOC, has called the country garbage. Here's what she actually said, talking about her proposals for the country. All of these things sound radical compared to where we are, but where we are is not a good thing. And this idea of 10% better from garbage shouldn't be what we settle for. She didn't say the country was garbage. She said some of the policies she opposes are garbage.
It's impossible to read the quote that way. The quote, what she's trying to say is there's a debate.
He said, this idea of 10% better from garbage shouldn't be what we settled for. She's talking about her proposal.
No, it's literally impossible to read the quote that way. What she's saying is there's a debate in the Democratic Party in which some people want to improve, in her mind, 10% from garbage, which maybe we'll say is Obamacare, where she wants to do, say, Medicare for all, which she views as being, I guess, 70% better than garbage. Her point is, we're starting at garbage. Some want to go a little better than garbage.
I understand
and she wants to go way better than garbage.
But she's talking about policy.
No, she's saying her starting point.
She's not talking about the country and the people.
She's saying
is garbage such a horrible word?
She's saying that America, in her view, right now, is garbage. But more.
But no. Then I want to put something up on that regard, because I want to put up a tweet from Donald Trump from 2014. He wrote, "The United States under President Obama has truly become the gang that couldn't shoot straight. Everything he touches turns to garbage." Stephen, that isn't AOC. That's Donald J. Trump.
Throughout this interview, Chris, you're continuing to conflate Donald Trump's criticisms of President Obama versus AOC's deep and systemic criticisms of the country itself. And so let me just cut to the heart of the issue. These four congresswomen detest America as it exists, as it is currently constructed. They want to tear down the structure of our country. They want it to be a socialist, open borders country. If you, as Donald Trump says, want to destroy America with open borders, you cannot say you love your country. If you attack border agents the way that Ocasio-Cortez has, it means you have a deep-seated hatred of the nation as it exists. That's why you want to erase its borders, fundamentally transform the country, and in the process, it doesn't matter if American citizens lose their jobs, lose their homes, lose their livelihoods, lose their health coverage, and lose their very lives. There's a gigantic, enormous distinction between Donald Trump saying, I'm going to get on the world stage and put America first in every single thing we do, versus the view that says America should never come first and American citizens should never come first, which is their view, and that's what we're going to take to the ballot box.
Stephen, thank you. Thanks for your time. I wanted to talk about immigration, but we didn't seem to get there. Please come back so we can discuss that as well, because there are a lot of interesting and controversial things happening on that front.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I think Republicans chanting "send her back" is talking about immigration. That's an immigration issue, isn't it? The racism of the Trump administration is an immigration issue. Although Chris Wallace never really said racism, but he did have that great follow-up question for Stephen Miller about how, first when Stephen Miller claimed that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez called America garbage, when she was really saying what we have in terms of universal health care right now, that Obamacare and Medicare for all and the different policies, 10% better than garbage is still not that great. And she was talking about policy, and then Trump was talking about everything Obama touches turning to garbage. And yeah, so that was kind of ridiculous. And Chris Wallace did do a good job, at least, of cross-examining on that one point. And Stephen Miller's attempt to draw a distinction between the two garbages, I think, was ridiculous and dishonest. And both those clips show, just the basic indecency and immorality of the Trump administration, and as sort of a palate cleanser or a way to come back to something that's a little bit cleaner and brighter and more moral. This is where, if you're following along on your clip list, this is where I bring in Elijah Cummings, who is something of a moral beacon, who has been fighting for racial equality since the 1960s, as he talks about how he's heard "send her back," go back where you came from, all the way back in the early 60s, and then he says something he hasn't said before, which is that Trump is racist, which I guess as a member of Congress he was trying to hold that back. But this is a lot of moral clarity from Elijah Cummings answering questioning from George Stephanopoulos. I've taken two different clips and edited them together. You can see I've made if you're watching the clip, where the edit takes place is pretty clear. And I'll talk about that with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
I know you said the events this week reminded you of 1962. You're 12 years old, trying to integrate a pool in Baltimore.
That's right, George. We were trying to integrate a Olympic-sized pool near my house, and we had been constrained to a wading pool in the black community, and we tried to integrate it, and as we did march towards that pool over a course of 6 days, I was beaten and all kinds of rocks and bottles thrown at me. And the interesting thing is that I heard the same kind of chants. Go home. You don't belong here. And they called us the N-word over and over and over again. And George, I got to tell you that I'm not the only person of color who has had those kind of experiences. And what it does when Trump does these things, when the president does these things, it brings up the same feelings that I had over 50-some years ago. And it's very, very painful. It's extremely divisive. And I just don't think that this is becoming of the President of the United States of America, the leader of the entire world. We can do better than that. I don't care what anybody says. And I think our Republican friends have to stand up and say, not that just that it might be inappropriate. No, they got to go further than that and say, Mr. President, you're absolutely wrong.
You know, do you believe President Trump is a racist?
I believe he is, yes, no doubt about it. And I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. But I got to tell you, George, let me tell you, when I think about what he said to these young ladies who are merely trying to bring excellence to government and trying to make sure that generations yet unborn have an opportunity to experience a true democracy. When I hear those things, it takes me back, like I said, and I can still remember bleeding from my forehead when people were throwing bottles, and these were adults, throwing bottles and saying, go home, and it just, I can't, and again, the president has to set the tone. He needs to be a role model. I would say to the president right now, Mr. President, we want you to be a role model. We want somebody in that White House who our children can be proud of, who our children can emulate, who our children will look up to. And that is not the kind of example that you're setting. And I'm telling you, Mr. President, you and we, our nation is better than that.
So like I said, moral clarity from Elijah Cummings. Why did ABC News there decide they had to bleep Elijah Cummings when he was just giving a eyewitness narrative of what people yelled at him? Go home, bleep, N-word, whatever. I think it was the N-word in there, whatever. But why was it that Elijah Cummings was bleeped there? That didn't seem like good news reporting to me, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section if you disagree. I have one more clip on this topic of, the Trump versus the squad, which is, I guess, how Trump wants to frame it, as he's trying to elevate the squad as the face of the Democratic Party, or Trump's racism, or Trump's lowest low, where Trump has promoted racism in his tweets and then received it from a enthusiastic Republican audience in North Carolina, and send her back, send her back, send her back, and then disavowed it, but then undisavowed it. If you saw the news summaries, that's kind of where we are at this point. So it's not a great look for the Republican Party or Donald Trump, in my opinion. But here is the last clip on that topic. It's Cory Booker also saying that Trump is racist, which he's hasn't said before, at least according to Dana Bash on CNN's State of the Union, asking the question. And then Cory Booker actually says that he's worse than racist and gives a little bit of history, which I think is good history. And I'm going to criticize Cory Booker in the last clip I show. So I'm going to say some nice things about Cory Booker in the last clip on the terrible Trump Trump's lowest low topic over here.
By asking about the president, and you said the president's original comment was racist. Many of your opponents, Bernie Sanders, Julian Castro, Kamala Harris, Kirsten Gillibrand, they've called Trump himself a racist. What makes you stop short of that?
Well, I actually am not. The reality is this is a guy who is worse than a racist. He is actually using racist tropes and racial language for political gain. He's trying to use this as a weapon to divide our nation against itself. And this is somebody who is very similar to George Wallace, to racists who he's using the exact same language. As somebody texted me during his rallies, I've seen this before in black and white, and now I'm seeing it again, decades later, where I thought our country was beyond this. I'm seeing this in full color. So this election, in many ways, is yet another chapter in our American history. We've seen it with the Know Nothing Party, which was trying to stop Irish and German immigrants. We've seen it with McCarthyism. We have a demagogue, fear-mongering person who is using race to divide. And this is a referendum, not on him. It's actually a referendum on the heart and soul of our country. Who are we going to be, and who are we going to be to each other?
So let's talk about your race to get the chance to run against.
And I am going to have a political clip from Cory Booker a little bit later. Cory Booker was actually on two shows. He was on CNN's State of the Union there, and then he was also on CBS's Face the Nation. He gave that same answer to Margaret Brennan, and I didn't take that clip. But Dana Bash also had this much better follow-up about his lack of about how he had a bad record on police reform when he was mayor of Newark, and that's the last clip I'm going to show. But I do agree that with Cory Booker that this is worse than racism. I mean, worse than racism if you watched AM Joy, and I put the link to the AM Joy clips also down in the video description, since I started with an AM Joy clip today. Worse than racism is white nationalism, because racism, it just means that you are prejudiced against people of other races. White nationalism means that you think only white people are like the real Americans or the real whatever in your country. In America, it's the real Americans. And that's kind of the message that Trump's been giving this week. And along with his lawlessness, his crimes that he's committed, it makes me think that our U.S. Constitution might be in jeopardy, that our constitutional system might really be in jeopardy. In fact, this year I did something, my passport's been expired for a long time, and I actually renewed my passport because I think we're coming up to a point where either the Constitution's going to uphold or I may need to be able to use this. I know there are all these celebrities all the time that if Trump wins or if whoever wins this election, I'm moving out of the United States. But I'm kind of getting scared with overt racism from the president, and then multiple crimes. That's the transition to this next part, the Russia conspiracy, Mueller report, what did I call the topic this week? It's the Trump crime/impeachment update, Mueller to testify this week, and maybe new Hope Hicks subpoena, because Mueller is going to testify this week and talk about the multiple instances of obstruction of justice that that there's substantial evidence Trump committed. That's in the Mueller report, and I assume that there's going to be live testimony about that this week. And then this last week, because of all the hullabaloo over Trump's racist tweets, one of the things that didn't get a lot of coverage was the information that came out in Michael Cohen's campaign finance felony investigation that showed that Hope Hicks lied and Trump was, as involved as we thought he was in committing campaign finance felonies. And that's the third clip I'm going to show you in this topic. I'm going to show you one clip of Jerry Nadler, one clip of Adam Schiff, and then one clip of Jerry Nadler, because Jerry Nadler and Adam Schiff are the chairs of the two committees that have Mueller testifying this week. And this first clip I'm going to show you is from Fox News Sunday, where Jerry Nadler was on, where Chris Wallace does a very brief introduction saying, you know, Democrats are hoping to get something to do, like go forward on impeachment, and then asked Jerry Nadler about what he's going to get from Mueller, because Mueller said he's not going to give any new information, and then asks him if, you know, there are impeachable offenses, and you can hear Jerry Nadler's answers in this 2-minute, 38-second clip from Fox News Sunday this morning over here.
On Wednesday, former special counsel Robert Mueller faces 5 hours of questioning before 2 House committees on his investigation of Russian interference in the 2020 campaign and possible obstruction of justice by President Trump. Some Democrats are counting on the testimony to convince Americans the House should impeach the president, or at least to damage his chances for re-election. Joining us now exclusively from New York, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler. Mr. Chairman, Robert Mueller has made it clear he doesn't want to testify, and he's not going to go beyond what he wrote in his report. Take a look.
We chose those words carefully, and the work speaks for itself. And the report is my testimony. I would not provide information beyond that which is already public in any appearance before Congress.
So, why are you putting Mueller and the country through this?
Well, we want the American people to hear directly from Special Counsel Mueller what his investigation found. The President and the Attorney General and others have spent the last few months systematically lying to the American people about what the investigation found. They've said that it found no collusion, that it found no obstruction, that it exonerated the President. All 3 of those statements are absolute lies. It found a great deal of collusion. It found a great deal of obstruction of justice by the President, and it found and it pointedly refused to exonerate the President. We think it's very important for the American people to hear directly what the facts are, because this is a president who has violated the law 6 ways from Sunday. If anyone else had been accused of what the report finds the president had done, they would have been indicted. It's important that we not have a lawless administration and a lawless president. It's important that the people see where we're at and what we're doing, what we're dealing with.
I want to follow up with what you just said. He's violated the law 6 ways from Sunday. If he weren't the president, he'd be indicted. You've read the 448-page report. Do you believe the president is guilty of high crimes and misdemeanors, the marker for impeachment by the House?
I think there is very substantial, well, the report presents very substantial evidence that the president is guilty of high crimes and misdemeanors, and we have to present, or let Mueller present those facts to the American people, and then see where we go from there, because the administration must be held accountable, and no president can be above the law.
Your committee, though, has said...
So very substantial evidence of high crimes and misdemeanors, which is the standard in the Constitution for impeachment: bribery, treason, high crimes and misdemeanors. And you also heard Jerry Nadler say something that I've said, and even I think was the title of my video after the Mueller report actually came out, where the no collusion, no obstruction, exoneration, all those things are false. There was collusion, there was obstruction, and there was no exoneration. And that is in the Mueller report, and hopefully more people will realize it after Mueller testifies, because, as I've said, and I think a lot of people have said at this point, that you need to turn the book into a movie so that more people will watch it. And that's kind of what Adam Schiff says, talking to Margaret Brennan about this same issue, where Margaret Brennan basically asked the same question that Chris Wallace asked. You know, what do you hope to get, since Mueller said he won't say more? And Adam Schiff is very explicit about the turning the book into a movie answer over here.
Engaging in this kind of behavior.
I want to ask you, because you this week will have a chance to ask questions of Robert Mueller, the special counsel, when he appears and answers questions about that 400-page report he turned in. He's already said he's not going to go beyond those 400-something pages. What is the purpose? What do you actually think you're going to learn?
Well, since most Americans, in their busy lives haven't had the opportunity to read that report, and it's a pretty dry prosecutorial work product, We want Bob Mueller to bring it to life, to talk about what's in that report. It's a pretty damning set of facts that involve a presidential campaign in a close race, welcoming help from a hostile foreign power, not reporting it, but eagerly embracing it, building it into their campaign strategy, lying about it to cover up, then obstructing an investigation into foreign interference, again to try to cover up. That's a pretty damning set of facts that most American people are not familiar with. And of course, the president keeps on trying to deceive them about those facts. But who better to bring them to life than the man who did the investigation himself? We want the people to hear it directly from him, not filtered through Bill Barr, who had his own misleading characterization of it, but from the man who did the work himself.
Last year on this program, you said there was a very...
So that's Adam Schiff, one of the two chairs of the two committees that are going to hear from Robert Mueller this week, explaining how they're turning the book into a movie, and it's going to be, you know, testimony that the American people are going to watch much more widely than the people who read the 448-page report, which I read. There's a link down in the video description to the 448-page report if you want to read the whole thing yourself. And there's definitely a lot of evidence, substantial evidence of obstruction of justice on multiple occasions. And there's a lot of evidence of collusion, just not enough evidence to prove conspiracy to commit a crime with the Russians. And anyway, I've talked about that many times before. I don't want to go into that. But one thing that's new that happened this week is that the affidavit in support of the Michael Cohen search warrant came out, and it included a bunch of communications between Michael Cohen, Donald Trump, and Hope Hicks before November 2016 about the payoffs to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, which shows that Trump knew about it and directed it, or is strong evidence that Trump knew about it and directed it, and also contradicts some things that Hope Hicks told Congress, and lying to Congress is a felony. And that is something that Chris Wallace asked Jerry Nadler about in the end of his interview, and Jerry Nadler points out that Trump is pretty much guilty of a felony based on what Michael Cohen pled guilty to, and I'm going to commit some legal analysis and explain that a little more after we watch that Jerry Nadler clip from Fox News Sunday together over here.
You are also asking Hope Hicks, who was a former top White House advisor and is now an executive vice president of Fox Corporation. You're asking her to come back before your committee to clarify earlier comments she made in testimony before your committee about her knowledge of the hush payments to Stormy Daniels. Her lawyer came out with a statement after you requested her to come back. He issued this statement: Ms. Hicks stands by her truthful testimony that she first became aware of this issue in early November 2016 as the result of press inquiries. Does that satisfy you, Mr. Chairman?
No, that does not, because that would seem to go against the evidence that was released by the court in the Michael Cohen, I think it was the Michael Cohen case the other day. So we've asked her to clarify how her testimony was truthful, given what the court filings reveal. But again, the key here is that all people owe the public their evidence, all witnesses owe the public their evidence, and it is our duty to make sure that people like McGahn testify, for example, because as the Mueller report showed, the president asked him to fire the special counsel so as to stop the investigation into the president. He asked him to deny publicly they had done so. Both of those, if true, are criminal acts by the president.
But I just want to pick up on one last thing with regard to Hope Hicks. This information came out when the judge ordered it released after the prosecutor in New York indicated that the case, the hush money case, is closed and they're not going to bring charges against anyone else. So isn't that kind of a dry hole? Because according to reports, the prosecutor in effect found that there was not sufficient evidence to show that President Trump actually knowingly, intentionally violated campaign finance laws?
Well, first of all, there was no, I don't think there was the latter finding, that he could not consider indicting the president because it is the policy of the Justice Department, pursuant to the Office of Legal Counsel memo, that a sitting president may not be indicted no matter what the evidence. Now, the finding, you know, in that case, Michael Cohen was sent to prison for these campaign finance violation done at the behest of Donald Trump, in the interest of Donald Trump, and the indictment said that Cohen did it at the request and direction of individual one who's now been identified as President Trump. So from a legal point of view, he is subject to indictment for that after the election. And the fact that they've closed the case does not mean that they found him not guilty in any way.
Chairman Nadler, thank you. Thanks for joining us, and we'll, of course, be watching
Sorry, I almost hit the wrong clip there, but you saw that Jerry Nadler, I think, explained how Trump is guilty of an additional felony beyond what's in the Mueller report, having to do with campaign finance violations, because Michael Cohen pled guilty to campaign finance felonies that he was directed to do by Donald Trump. The prosecutor is not supposed to accept that plea. The judge is not supposed to accept that plea unless they believe there's evidence to back that up. And that's what came out this week, that there's all these like communications back and forth between Michael Cohen and Trump right around the time he made this deal for the hush money. That's a campaign finance violation. And Michael Cohen, so that backs up what Michael Cohen said in his plea allocution, that he was directed by Donald Trump to commit these campaign finance felonies. And if you look at the Chapter 18 of the federal criminal statutes, 18, right at the beginning, or very near the beginning, Section 2, and I put it, there's a link down in the video description to 18 U.S. Code Section 2 principles, says whoever commits an offense against the United States or aids, abets, counsels, commands, induces, or procures its commission is punishable as a principle. And then whoever willfully causes an act to be done, if directly performed by him or another, would be an offense against the United States, is punishable as a principle. So if you get somebody else to do it and it's a federal crime, you are punishable as if you actually committed the crime. And that's the campaign finance crime that Michael Cohen committed at the direction of Donald Trump. Means that that's another felony that Trump has awaiting for him after he gets out of office. Although if he wins re-election, the statute of limitations may run, which is kind of bogus. But anyway, I wanted to point all that out to you, and that's a story that hasn't gotten enough coverage because of all these other stories. Is that why Trump is playing up the whole racism angle this week? Because of that story, or because of the upcoming Mueller testimony, or just because he's like a racist? You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I'm going to show, I have one more topic. This is the Democratic candidate 2020, or the 2020 Democratic candidate update. This is Cory Booker's Glass House on police reform. And this is, I said Chris Wallace had the best follow-up question on how Trump had called America garbage when Obama was president. Well, this is actually the best cross-examination question, not follow-up, but just basic cross-examination. And I think you're going to hear this again. CNN announced who are going, the two nights of the Democratic debates on July 30th and 31st. And Joe Biden is up against Kamala Harris and Cory Booker. He's right in between the two of them. And Cory Booker did not get to be on the same night as Joe Biden last time, even though Cory Booker has spent all this time attacking Biden on his crime bill history and some of his history not being against mass incarceration. And Kamala Harris got all the glory for attacking Biden on the whole segregation, working with segregationist issue. But I think that both Cory Booker and Kamala Harris will be attacking Biden in the second night of the debate when they're both on stage with Biden. And I think Biden is going to be ready to attack them both back about how they're both attacking him from living in glass houses, because as I've talked about many times before, Kamala Harris was a prosecutor in San Francisco and then attorney general in California, and was not a big opponent of mass incarceration, and did a bunch of things here in California that many people on the left that I know, like me, don't think that she was a anti-mass incarceration prosecutor. And Cory Booker also does not have the greatest record on police reform when he was mayor of Newark, which, to her credit, Dana Bash brings up in the final news clip I want to show you all before my bonus Dash and Sandy clip at the end, of course. But this is the final, just under 2-minute clip from CNN State of the Union showing Cory Booker's glass house on police reform that I think you might be hearing from Joe Biden when Cory Booker attacks Joe Biden on this issue over here.
About your record, which you are running on. You were mayor of Newark. And part of that record comes with the DOJ report, which talks about some of your time as mayor and says that black residents were at least 2.5 times more likely than white residents to be stopped, to be arrested, or searched. And the report says this about black residents, quote, this undeniable experience of being disproportionately affected by the Newark Police Department's unconstitutional policing helps explain the community distrust and cynicism that undermines effective policing in Newark. Do you take any responsibility for the way this policing hurt black residents of Newark under your watch?
Yeah, I actually took responsibility. Most folks who know New Jersey know I inherited a police department that had decades of challenges with accountability, challenges along racial lines. And we actually stepped up to deal with the problem, not only working with the DOJ, but working with the ACLU to put forward what was a national standard-setting level of accountability. So I'm proud of that record as a mayor of trying to take on these problems. And frankly, as a senator, I've won one of the few senators and put forth legislation to create more police accountability, more transparency, so that we could begin to deal with some of the deep racial issues that we have that permeate not just policing, but also everything from prosecutorial actions to our criminal justice system as a whole. We had real challenges in the city of Newark, and we worked hard not only to deal with that, but on prisoner reentry programs and transforming our court system. We did a lot of things that really have become models for what needs to happen, not just in New Jersey, but in our nation as a whole.
I want to get to a couple of other issues.
Now, that citation to working with the ACLU is particularly disingenuous because I actually worked as a volunteer attorney with the ACLU of New Jersey, and even briefly as a paid consulting attorney with the ACLU of New Jersey when Cory Booker was mayor of Newark. And, you know, I don't speak for the ACLU. I certainly don't speak for the ACLU of New Jersey, but it was my impression that the ACLU was fighting Cory Booker, not working with Cory Booker, and that Cory Booker was more an impediment to police reform than an advocate for police reform when he was mayor. And did you notice how he started off his answer there to Dana Bash saying, you know, he takes responsibility after that DOJ report, but then everything after he said, I take responsibility, contradicts him saying he takes responsibility. It was like, oh, I inherited all, you know, decades worth of problems and all this and all that. It was all like ducking responsibility, but I don't know. I'm not a big Cory Booker fan. Maybe he'll do well in the debates coming up against Joe Biden, but I think you're going to hear Joe Biden go after Cory Booker for his record as mayor of Newark, since Joe Biden is probably going to be better prepared for the debates this time around. And I am hoping to cover the debates the week after next, maybe even on both nights, but at least one debate clip roundup like I did. You know, I took the top 15 clips from the MSNBC debates last month, at the end of last month, and then at the end of this month there'll be the CNN debates, which I will either do 1 or 2 debate clip roundups, and I'll start asking you about that. But like I said, that's kind of a preview, and that's my last news clip, my last topic for my Sunday live clip roundup today. I hope you appreciated all of the clips I picked out. I spend pretty much all day Sunday, every Sunday for the last 326 Sundays, including today, I guess. So if you want to support me continuing to spend that time and effort every Sunday picking the best clips and giving my commentary and criticism on those clips, there are links down in the video description to Patreon and PayPal as ways to support my LiberalViewer videos. And I also, of course, appreciate the Super Chat contributions. These are the ones I saw so far. Thanks, Lulu Girl, Nelson, and Tomate, and happy birthday, Chrismer. I appreciate all of those Super Chat contributions, all the ways you support my videos, the thumbs up, the positive comments, supportive comments down in the comment section, both from the live viewers, the recorded viewers, and as I promised earlier, I am going to end the show with a bonus Dash and Sandy clip as usual. This is a couple weeks ago I showed Sandy pushing Dash out of the sunspot. This shows how Dash and Sandy can kind of share the sunspot, although Dash, the cat, is really the one who is getting all the sun. But isn't that always the way with the dogs and cats? I don't know. You can let me know what you think after we watch the Dash and Sandy clip together over here. So there's the bonus Dash and Sandy clip. Like I said, I hope you appreciate all the time and work I put into these shows every Sunday. There are links down in the video description to support that work, or like I said, the thumbs up, the supportive comments, and I will possibly be covering the Mueller hearings on Wednesday, or maybe on Thursday morning. I'll take some clips depending on how things go. If they're really momentous, or there's a big dud, as they kept saying on Fox News Sunday. Maybe the Mueller hearings are going to be a big dud. So depending on how they go, I might cover them with a special live clip roundup on Thursday. Maybe I won't. Well, you can let me know down in the comment section if you think if you'd like me to do that. If I don't do that, I guess I will just be back next week, like every Sunday, to do my Sunday live clip roundup of the Sunday morning news analysis shows on the Big Five corporate outlets. And I guess until I do the Mueller clip roundup, or until next Sunday, I will be seeing all of you around the internet.